Natasha Wilson. I am the executive editor for the Harlequin Teen Program, and I'm here today with author Don Metcalf, who has written Indelible, Book 1 of the Twixt. And Don, in your author bio, I hear that you are inspired by fairy tales, puppet visionaries, British humor, and graphic novels. But what I'm most interested in is the line on your bio page that says you know how to kill a man with a spoon. Can you tell us more?
Well, that might be an exaggeration. I've never actually attempted to kill someone with a spoon. But I do have a black belt, second-degree black belt in Shaolin Kempo Karate. So theoretically, if we trained with spoons, I'm sure I could kill someone with it. Actually, the rest of the quote says that using a bazooka is so much easier.
Well, that I would like to see, too. So Indelible is book 1 of a new series. Can you just tell us a little bit about the book and what made you have to write it?
Actually, I always wrote science fiction, fantasy, and genre novels. That's where my heart is. It's what I love to write. One thing that was getting me was that I was seeing kind of like the bad boy, immortal guy come down and show the 16-year-old girl the way to love, and that was kind of getting to me. So I decided to mix it up a bit, and what I kind of think of it as is a sort of Edward Scissorhands or Peter Pan meets Joe Black. So it's got a little more innocence, a little more danger, and a lot more sharp, pointy objects.
We like the sharp, pointy objects. I'm
Yes.
always big on swords, and inked scalpel is pretty cool. So tell us more about the Twixt, because we know in speculative fiction, world building is really important, and the Twixt is kind of a different world. So give us a little more info about that.
One thing that I really like is that my background involved culture anthropology, and I studied abroad. I lived in London for a long time, and I
nice.
looked at all the machismo cultures,
I
so
did not know
Spain,
that.
Italy, Greece. Oh, I had a great time. And one of the things that really struck me is that I really like looking at the myths and legends from different cultures. And what I liked was the idea that these all are true, and they kind of have a toehold in our reality. And if it was running alongside ours, what would that look like? And the way that I describe the Twixt is that it's all around us, but the places where magic is still pervasive in our world, that's where the Twixt shows up. So sort of like an archipelago of all the places that magic still exists in our world.
And it's kind of tethered to our world through some special characters. We'll get into that in a minute. But I also was told by a little scribe that you're into RPGs.
I am. I am.
Does that inspire some of your storytelling, or how does that influence
It really does. Actually, because I started role-playing games when I was about 14 years old. I was the girlfriend from like Dork Tower that would come in with this whole group of guys, and there was me, which is a very interesting perspective to have. But after a while, I started gaming, and I was the GM, I was the game master, and so I got to control them.
Oh,
So
yeah.
a 15-year-old girl controlling 7 or 8 guys is its own reality.
I'm not going to argue
maybe
that.
I can blame that.
I'm starting to get a sense of where all this dark and twisted,
Very dark and
fantastical
twisted.
fantasy world is coming from.
But the truth is that you really get inspired by other people who are creative, intelligent. They can think beyond what you can come up with. So if you give them a piece of inspiration, what they come back with is something that you may have never thought of. So I find that some of the best creative work comes from other people kind of adding into your space. So the best part for me is having editing and having critique partners and having people that I really trust tell me what they think when we're going and making just crazy new worlds and crazy new characters.
Well, you know, that's what I like to do. I will always tell you what I think, and what I think is it's great. So are there any specific dark fairy tales that, like any one in particular that you love that maybe was influential on you growing up, that maybe helped you create this kind of dark and twisted fairy tale world?
Well, the funny thing is I think it comes from a lot of things from Grimm's fairy tales and some of the classics from Hans Christian Andersen and Oscar Wilde. I think the original Little Mermaid, not the Disney one, was very influential for me.
Yeah, that has a dark ending, doesn't it?
It's very dark. It's a very dark
Yeah.
story. There were also a number of books and movies that I very much enjoyed growing up. Now my tastes go towards like a Guillermo del Toro kind of things. Pan's Labyrinth. When we were younger, it was Labyrinth, Legend.
Yeah. The pants.
Yeah, yeah, it kind of makes sense.
Yeah.
But I like the dark kind of twists on stories, and there's a beauty in that. I think that's probably why The Dark Crystal by Jim Henson was probably one of my favorite movies. It was dark and beautiful, and any one of the characters could be their own culture. You could just keep diving in. I felt that way about my favorite books too.
Yeah, nice. So everyone knows that behind every great story, there's a great hero. So I would love to have you tell us about Joy, the star of the Twixt.
Joy, I love Joy. One of the things that I think I like most about her is that she's very strong and very honest, even when things are heading her that are just beyond belief. And she reacts to them, I think, more realistically. Even though I have a background in martial arts, I didn't want to give her martial arts because it seems that everybody does martial arts in genre fiction. So I wanted to give her something else, but an outlet, and that was her gymnastics, and that was her team spirit. And then when she left that kind of left a large hole for her.
Yeah.
And so she had to find her strength in other ways. She also, I think, has a very realistic approach to when things are really strange and really awful, is she panics. I don't know how you could embrace the strangeness and just kind of run with it. I enjoy the fact that she actually pauses or freaks out or screams or yells at a window.
Acts like a normal human being.
Acts like a person.
And helps us relate to her.
Yeah, and that's what I like about her. She also really includes her friends and her family, which is something that I think we miss in a lot of stories. It feels very solo, that this is the shy person who is estranged from their family or has no friends except for one or two really close friends. And I like that that wasn't where she was coming from.
Nice.
And we kept them in the book.
And every great story, besides a great heroine or hero, has, well, Indelible Ink is the hero of this book, and he is different from any other hero I've ever read about. So tell us something about ink and what it means to be a scribe.
Originally, the scribes were made to put signatura, which are sigils and marks on other people, like that, right? And that's Briarhook's sigil. That's his signatura. So the scribe's job is to write signatura on the humans and the places in the world that still have magic in them. And that gives them a job, and that pretty much was their entire existence, was their job. It wasn't until Ink, which is his sister, we have Invisible Ink and Indelible Ink. And Invisible Ink started creating her own personality and kind of going for things that were outside her job. And Ink hadn't done that. This is the story of Ink becoming a person.
Wow.
Something beyond his job.
So one of the fun things in the book that you get right up front, so this is not a spoiler, is Joy doesn't realize that she has the sight, that she can see folk until she actually sees Indelible Ink and his sister Invisible Ink. Tell us just a little about their meeting and what happens that's kind of the inciting incident for this entire journey she goes through.
So the sight actually isn't from me. That's actually traditional fairy lore that comes from Irish Gaelic background. And it actually was an old story that if you were a human with a sight, the fairies didn't like that and they would poke out your eyes. So that actually wasn't me who came up with that. But what was mine was that this was not a love at first sight, no pun intended. It was a moment that did not exactly, you see the hot guy across a crowded room and suddenly there are stars and Tweety birds and the hearts. That is not what happened. I guess I borrowed that from my own life because my husband and I did not have love at first. But I love him dearly.
Absolutely. So you know it can be true.
Yes.
And it absolutely works. Now, I think secondary characters are crucial in any fantasy world, and Dawn has kind of a hint that I have a crush on one of the characters in the Twixt. His initials are GC, but maybe Dawn can tell us about just a few of the fantastic creatures and humans that we can meet in the Twixt.
I think that's probably the most fun about it, is that you're getting all these different characters from all these different worlds and all these different cultures, and I kind of mix them up. The one that you're referring to is Grouse Claude, and Grouse Claude is actually borrowed from a Chinese fortune frog.
Oh.
And they had 3 arms. I gave mine 4, and then I gave him Chinese silk smoking special. He's a nobleman. He speaks very genteelly, but he's also an 8-foot tall 4-armed toad with an attitude. So that's pretty definite. There's Philly, who is Valkyrie.
Yes.
And I love her. with her cape of finger bones.
Yep.
There's Kestrel, who is one of the trackers. And there's also a number of other people that you find who are kind of associated to people in the Twixt. Dennis Thomas is one, and I don't want to tell too much about him. And then there's Ink has her own group of very lovely, sexy men
Yes.
called the Cabana Boys. And the Cabana Boys are human, but they know a little bit more about the Twixt and have the site as well.
You have got to read it to believe it. Thank you, Dawn, so much for being here. We are excited to talk about Indelible and the Twixt. We hope people will check it out. And thank you for coming down to Comic-Con 2013 in New York City.
Thank you so much. This is great.